And we are on. Welcome back to another great edition of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the city of Sheeple on a warm spring day, which I can't complain about the weather. And as you've seen from promotion and today's title, we have a very special interview today with a very special guest, one of the hardest working people and really down to earth people. And we're going to be covering quite a few topics. I do ask that you save your questions towards the end. If I see something that's relevant to what we're talking about, then of course I'll take it. Please put your questions in chat in caps if you want me to ask them, otherwise I will overlook them. So without further ado, let me introduce the one and only Mr. Jeff Belanger. Jeff, welcome back.
Good to be back with you. How's it going?
Great. It's been almost 3 years in the making for this part 2, and I'm glad we finally did it. Now, most people out there know that I'm an adventurous person. I'm a skydiver. So when I received your book, obviously I was expecting something, of what you would have normally written in the past. But I have to say, I was like, wow, he's cool. He's also an adventure seeker. Obviously, you did it for different reasons. Now, I'm throwing a lot of hints out here, and the reason is I'm going to ask you to tell people what is the title of your new book, and then we could talk about why you wrote it.
So the title is The Call of Kilimanjaro, Finding Hope Above the Clouds.
And the reason you wrote it was because you're...
Wait, can I interrupt you?
Yes.
My first book was The World's Most Haunted Places.
Yeah. Polar opposite.
Right. I thought it'd just be helpful, right? Illustrate your point. Go on. Sorry.
So the reason you wrote this book was because of your brother-in-law, Chris, that passed away. It was leukemia, right?
He died from cancer, not leukemia, but he did die from cancer.
Now, what society was it that you decided to embark on this great journey? And if I'm not mistaken, Kilimanjaro is the third largest peak under K9?
No, it's not even the third, but it's the tallest peak on the African continent.
Gotcha.
So there's these famed 7 summits, right? The highest peak on each of the continents. Everest is by far the tallest on Earth, and that's Asia, but Africa is Kilimanjaro, 19,341 feet if you're keeping score, and I suggest you should. So here's the thing. Sometimes the universe conspires to force us to do things. So it's not just my brother-in-law dying from cancer. I took 2 semesters of Swahili in college, which is the language of East Africa, Tanzania, right? And that's a weird story too. And then I've been a hiker, since I like hiking. I hike the White Mountains of New England, and I enjoy getting out and doing mountains. So when my brother-in-law got sick with cancer, it was a 2+ years of, but from the time we found out to the time he actually passed away. And so all these things had kind of swirled around right here in the middle of my life. So when the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, a woman I know, was at a paranormal event, a ghost hunt, and we're raising money to preserve this historic building. And she said, Jeff, we've got this fundraiser coming up. And I'm like, oh, Amy, I'm so busy, but I'll help if I can. I've helped in the past. She said, we're going to climb Kilimanjaro. And I just froze. And I went, okay, my brother-in-law just passed away 7 months ago. Kilimanjaro's been on my bucket list. I took Swahili in college. I'm a hiker. I'm 2 years younger than Chris was when he was diagnosed. Do this in his honor, raise money for cancer. I was just like, the universe doesn't hold things out on a golden platter for you like that often.
I was just going to say, because it really sounded like in this incident, it really did sort of lay out everything for you.
Yeah, at some point, and so I just looked at her and I said, Amy, yeah, I'm in. Like, what else could I say? And that's how it all started.
Now, your book is 8 chapters chronicling the beginning of literally of the climb and the journey, and the last chapter, which is again Monday, is the heading home, right?
Yeah. So I thing about memoirs, right, is they can get so hoity-toity. They can get very much like full of yourself kind of thing. As an author, I could tell you right now, writing the book was harder than climbing the mountain. But I wanted to be focused, right? Just this slice of Africa, this experience I had that was really transformative for me on a not just a physical level, but a spiritual level. And so I, it's not all about like my views on everything. Who cares about that, right? It's just about this one experience and how I got there and how it kind of transformed me over the span of 8 days, because it took 6 days to get to the top and 2 days to get back down.
Wow. Now, and I see in the group photo, how many of you are there?
That is the whole shebang. So there were 12 of us climbing from the United States, 5 of us from New England. Leukemia and Lymphoma Society put the whole group together. 1 from New Jersey, 6 from California. New Jersey and California, I didn't even meet them until we were in Tanzania. And so there were 12 of us, and in addition to that, 48 people. Those are the 48 guides, porters, those that literally helped carry our tents, our gear, our food, our water. Through that whole journey. So it took 48 people to get 12 of us, and not even 12. 2 didn't make it. 10 of us to the top.
What happened to those 2?
So 2 camps below the summit, we got health checks twice a day, and they just weren't handling the altitude very well.
Hypoxia.
The thing about altitude,
yeah,
you don't know how it's going to affect you until you get there. Like that's you can't really simulate it anywhere. It's short of going to altitude. And some people can handle it. And, one of the guys in our group, he said, when I lay down, my tent is spinning around. Like when you're really drunk and you have the bed spins. I went, oh, yeah, that's not good. My tent's not spinning. Like
I can completely relate. I did a jump from 17,000 feet of skydive, and it wasn't a planned halo jump, so there wasn't oxygen on the plane, and we got a little extra, a few thousand feet, because there was a porn star in the plane, and sure enough, she showed herself to the pilot, and he brought us to 17,000 feet. Now, most
I
people,
hope nothing exploded on her.
No. Fortunately,
without the pressurization,
right? But
I'm not even joking. Those things bubble.
They could. I know.
Yeah.
And yeah. I do know that she was very dizzy, wanted to be let out 2,000 feet earlier. And just watching, there was about 24 of us on that plane. And the different range of people that were extremely dizzy to just barely lightheaded. To me, that just seemed fine. And it's just like you said, you can't simulate it. You just have to get up there. And it affects each and every single person in a different way. Like you just said with these 2 people who obviously was affecting them far more than others.
Well, the tricky thing about a plane is that, so keep in mind, we started at 7,500 feet and slowly walked over the span of days up to 12, 13, 14, 15 and on, right? So we had a chance to acclimatize. On an airplane, you have minutes, and so your body's just not used to it. So I could imagine even someone who could handle a mountain could get dizzy because you get up there so fast, and those planes aren't pressurized. I did a jump once too, because I'm deathly afraid of falling, and I thought, what better way to celebrate my birthday?
That's why I started skydiving, because of my fear of heights.
I didn't have a fear of heights. I have a fear of falling. It's different, and it's weird. I know it's messed up, but so I did it too. And I remember it was after Kilimanjaro, and getting up there, I jumped from like 14,000 feet, and I just remember breathing and going, "Ooh, I remember this." This is thinner. But it's not like you need to make any sort of, snap decisions when you're falling from an airplane at 17,000 feet, right? Oh wait, no, you do.
You do.
Oh,
yeah, that's right. And you don't have a minute. You have average skydive is about 50 seconds from exit to opening.
Yeah.
And then you're absolutely right. We don't have that time. Now,
right.
I'm assuming, based on all the pictures and everything else in your book, you obviously had a chance to experience the culture, like the food. I see you pictures with you and the locals. So tell us some of those experiences that really stuck out in your mind.
So Tanzania was beautiful. It was I've never seen poverty like that in my life, and I've been to Mexico, Costa Rica, Peru. Like I've been all over the U.S. What they would call middle class, we would call like homeless and destitute. Yet the air was so clean. I mean, no pollution, no noise pollution, and then at night no light pollution. Just absolutely the cleanest air I've ever breathed. And the people, I've never felt like a rich white guy before. I'm middle class. Like that's the life I live is very middle class. And I've been to other countries where I'm like, yeah, I get that I have more than a lot of people here, but there it was just obscene. And yet the people, and because I spoke some Swahili, that helped a lot too. I mean, here's this lone white guy in the whole city, who knows some Swahili, and they just got such a kick out of it that I could, far from fluent, but I could say a few words and I could communicate a little bit. The food was amazing. I fell in love with this dish called kitimoto, and they serve it with something called ugali. And if you saw it, it looks like a pile of mashed potatoes, but it's actually cornmeal. And you eat it with your bare hands. You pick up the ugali, and then you kind of like scoop up the kitimoto. And the kitimoto is this like all day barbecue, slow cooked pork. It's like the best barbecue smoky pork I've ever had. But barbecue is putting your head into the wrong place. It's like more tomatoey based, but the food was just amazing. I loved it. And Kilimanjaro beers.
Ooh.
For the 20-ounce bottles were $1 each.
Wow.
And I can't tell you how many 20 American dollars will buy you, because I lost count around 12.
Well, obviously you had a good time.
I'm not sure. Well, that was after we had successfully done the climb and got back to our hotel, and you just waved to the waiter, and he just kept. I handed him a 20. I'm like, well, let me know when this runs out. Like so.
Now, at what point in the climb did the temperatures actually hit zero? Because I'm curious how many days you had to endure sub-zero temperatures.
So to give you a mental picture, if you're picturing the continent of Africa, Kilimanjaro is on the eastern side where it sort of bulges out. It's near the coast, and it's just below the equator and straddles the border between Tanzania and Kenya. And so at the bottom, I mean, it's summer all the time, except the rainy season. It's right near the equator. So in the first day, I mean, you're in t-shirts, you're sweating, it's, in the 70 degrees range. And then each day you climb higher, then it starts to feel like, a mid-fall day. You wake up and there could have been a frost the night before. And in the morning, it's maybe in the 40s, and then it warms up to 50 and 60, and the sun comes out, and you're literally among and above the clouds. And so once there's no cloud cover, the sun is quite warming. But it didn't get to zero until we got to like 15,000 feet. And then when night fell, like, it was cold. I mean, really cold. And once you go up above 15,000 feet, I mean, there's glaciers up there. So, I mean, and they've been there for thousands of years. So there's like, Arctic tundra ice at the very top. So so that last night, once we left our tents, because we went for the summit, we started at midnight. And once we left our tents, I was in full winter gear, full, like Arctic winter, protection.
And I also see a picture where I think you're about to sleep, and literally you look like you're being swaddled. You're literally, yeah. And I want to say parka, but I think you wrote that it's kind of like a parka.
Yeah, it's like a giant ski parka that covers your whole body except your face. And that was a Christmas present from my sister, and I knew I needed one, and so it's a 0-degree rated sleeping bag for those of you who are camping inclined, which, by the way, I am not. Camping is not my favorite thing to do. In fact, it's among my least favorite things to do, but there's no other way. There's no hotels.
I know. Right? I don't see any.
That's my Kilimanjaro Hilton right there. And so that sleeping bag was totally cozy, but you have to sleep with like your camera batteries and stuff like that in your sleeping bag, because if it gets too cold, they'll drain. So it's a little bit uncomfortable, because at your feet, I put all my stuff down there at my feet, and you're kicking like these, camera batteries and so on, but perfectly warm. And I had a mattress pad under me. That's this self-inflating thing that I borrowed from a friend. And you just take the valve, and it opens up from like a half an inch to a full inch. And I was looking at that thing going, how's that going to keep a 195-pound man off the ground? And that first night, as I lay down on top of it, I realized it's not.
Yeah, I would think not.
It's not at all. And so, I mean, I kept it there because I'm like, well, it must be doing something, right? But to this day, I couldn't tell you what it was doing. Because I'm in my 40s. I get it. My life is too comfortable.
We're Gen X.
All day, right? I'll go all day. I'll get sweaty, dirty. It doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, I want like a shower and a big feather bed.
Yes, I'm the same way. And if it's warm outside or hot, air conditioning too. So
totally. Yeah. So
we have creatures of comfort.
Yeah, that was not my idea of a good time, the camping part. But I also recognize that that's, like I said, that's the way you have to do it. You have to stay in a tent. You have to camp, and even all that being said, I would do it again.
Now, I can't even imagine what some of the stories you guys were talking about at the end of the nights as you're making the climb. I would imagine that a lot of other people on this trip wanted to ask you about ghosts, and I'm guessing that you probably, or did you ask anybody about local hauntings on the mountain or in the area of Tanzania?
So the good news is when I was on this climb, nobody cared at all about my job. In fact, only a few people even knew that I was an author or that I was a paranormal guy, anything, which is fine. I actually really enjoyed keeping it that way. However, I also am a naturally inquisitive guy. Some of our guides were Chaga people, and the Chaga have lived around on the Tanzania side. They've lived around Kilimanjaro for thousands and thousands of years, and they have a really interesting belief in ghosts and spirituality, in that there's no separation between our world and the spirit world. To them, it's perfectly normal, the idea of interacting in both directions, that one can intervene on either side. Like the spirits could intervene on the living side, the living could intervene on the spirit side. Your grandma, your great grandma, they're all still around and they're all still relevant. And I think that's part of like this story culture, where you pass it on one person to another. And I thought that was kind of a beautiful way to look at it. So the idea of like a spooky haunted house, that's a little bit foreign to them. It's more like, well, yeah, grandma's still in that house because our family still lives there and she still has some say,
Wow. That's a total culture shock, I would imagine.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was cool.
It is cool, totally.
Yeah, a little more matter of fact about the thing. Like, well, yeah, she's still here and still relevant. What? Yours isn't?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's so great people though. Really enjoyed my time there and just being with the people there. It's strange to, like I remember the first time I went to Australia. I was in Sydney. And to my Australian friends, I apologize, but I was a little disappointed because I felt like I was in like downtown Denver. I said, I'm literally as far from home as I can go. If I go any further, I'm getting closer again, right? Like that's the other side of the planet. And yet it was so Americanized, Subways and Starbucks and all that, it was McDonald's, everything was around. And I was like, oh, wow. But in Africa, you walked around and you're like, no, I'm in Africa. Like I'm not in Kansas. I'm not in Europe. I'm in Africa. And there was just this, I don't know, there's something, I don't know. It's primal to it. Primal's not the right word, but there's just this connection I felt. I can't even say why, but it felt like this is where I need to be right now for sure.
It's been so long since I've been somewhere without a McDonald's, another country, and that would have had to have been Greece in the 80s before it really started to become Americanized. I mean, from what I hear from my family, Coca-Cola didn't even come until the mid-70s. So I really haven't had a chance to experience what you've had, and I really hope I do at some point. Now, I'm assuming because you've had such a great experience, you're going to give it another shot at some point?
I can't imagine going the rest of my life without going up that mountain again. I just can't. So I did this in 2017. It was March of 2017 that we did this. And I spent like a year and a half writing the book. Many drafts. It was the hardest thing I've ever written because I'm really good at telling other people's stories. Like if you tell me your story about seeing a UFO or about having, experiencing a ghost, I'm good at editing you, right? You could be like, oh, that day I had a latte with my breakfast. I'm like, yeah, no one cares about that. Let's just get, you know what I mean? Like, I could get you to the meat and I can edit you and I can, whatever. And that's, but when it's your own story, you're like, oh no, people might care about that latte. And it takes months and months of like putting it in a drawer and then looking at it later and going, oh yeah, no one's going to care about that latte. And so, editing yourself is a challenge. And how do I tell the story? And how do I be that honest and that vulnerable, right? Like there's stuff in there where like, I'm like, my mom's going to read this.
Yeah.
And like this, I said a few things about her that were just like, hey, my mom was overprotective and I grew up with asthma and she was like coddled me in some ways. And I'm mad about it. I wish she hadn't. She read that, by the way. Like,
what was her response?
Only when it was in the book form. Too late, right?
Too late to change it. That's right.
I'm like, here's the finished copy, Mom. You can read it now because I'm not can't make changes. No, I think she knows it. She sort of owned it, you know. She's like, yeah, it's scared because it scared her. It's not something she could relate to. She didn't have asthma growing up. I did. And so for me, it was normal. It was my reality, my life, and whatever. I was never scared of dying. She was scared of me dying, but I wasn't. And I think that's right. That's the way. We're all stars of our own movies, and we all have our own crosses to bear, whatever that may be. You know, whether you need glasses or whether you need a wheelchair or whether you need whatever, you know, hearing aids, whatever that thing is. Like we all have to overcome our own little things. And still live in the world with everybody else. And so yeah, it was just one of those things to like take a long, hard look at like, how did I get here in my 40s, you know, heading off to Africa and doing this thing. And you get introspective. The other thing too, when my brother-in-law was dying, because I'm a paranormal guy, he and I got a lot closer. When he first met my sister, when they started dating and then got married, Chris is funny. We could talk football, high school principal. You know, he was fun to have around at holidays and all that, but we weren't that close. But once he got the cancer diagnosis, he spent that first year in like depression.
Yeah.
And I mean, hey, I can't say how I would be or how you would be. Who knows, right? But
I imagine the same way he was.
Sure. Like you got to come to grips with, you know, my nephew was 3 at the time that he got diagnosed.
Ooh.
And oh my God, you know, and my sister just was in total denial. But after about a year, he called me and he said, "Hey, Jeff, you're into some pretty weird stuff." And I said, "Yeah, that's definitely true." You know, the ghost stuff and the paranormal. And he said, "I'm going through something weird." And I said, "That's true too." And so we started talking about this thing, death, this process that he was going through. Because, you know, for most people, death is quick. You know, you go to bed one night, you don't wake up, car accident, heart attack, whatever, right? Like it's, for most people, you don't get a lot and but he had 2 years to stare this thing down.
And I can't even imagine the pain and things that he felt from medications and other things in the last 6 months or a year, or even that whole 2-year process. I can't even imagine that, because that's on top of the emotional part.
Well, right. So yeah, he did the chemo, the radiation, all that, and so he was, you know, I'm going to fight this thing, but it was pretty evident, especially in hindsight, he was not going to win. The objective was only to prolong and spend more time with his son and his family. But in the last month, I think he sort of made peace with what was happening. And that's when he and I talked a lot. And it was some of the most profound conversations I've ever had in my life. He spoke about, I remember it was Thanksgiving dinner, 2015. He was there, but he couldn't eat anything. And he was just in really rough shape. And about a week later, he went into the hospital. And he called me the morning after his first night there, and he said, "Hey, last night something really weird happened. I'm in bed, and suddenly I'm 20 feet above my body looking down at myself." And I said, "Oh." And he said, "Doesn't even make sense, because the ceiling of the hospital room is maybe 10 feet, but I'm double that. And I know it doesn't make any sense, but that's what I saw." I said, "Well, what'd you do?" He said, "I'm afraid of heights. I was scared, and it was over. I was back in my body." And I said, "Okay." And then I've heard stories like this before.
Oh, yeah. I've actually had my own near-death experience, and I was just going to ask you, did he ever experience something like this before, or was this a first time? Isolated?
That was the first. Okay. That was the first in the hospital. But then the following day, he called me again. He said, "Okay, it's happening again. I said, "Can you control it? Can you move?" He said, "Nope. I'm very conscious to just let it be what it'll be, but I'm not scared anymore because it's happened." And so for days in the hospital, he was having these out-of-body experiences. He said he was just kind of floating around. He was aware of where he was. He could see himself usually. And then after about a week in the hospital, the doctors finally come in and tell him the news that we know is coming, but it's just so hard to hear when they say, "Look, there's nothing more we can do. Your organ failure is imminent." Oof. Yeah, and that's a tough one, you know. And by the way, we're already past 2 years. We're at 2 years and a month and a half now, you know. So he's already past the expiration, and so they sent him home to hospice care at his house, and it was about December 14th or so, 15th. That my family drove down to Connecticut, where he lives, and that was weird because that's That's not a visit, I mean, we knew what that
It's a
was.
goodbye.
That's the goodbye.
Yeah.
And so many people complain when we lose a loved one. Oh, I never got to say goodbye. I've experienced both now, and I can't tell you which one sucks worse,
Yeah,
right?
it's kind of like that mind or thought experiment. Would you rather know when you're gonna die or how you're gonna die? I don't want to know either.
Either.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No. No, no, no. Yeah, it's so dry. When I got there though, so my sister goes to the grocery store and he's on a machine that's helping him have some oxygen, and he's skin is this yellow color that's I know is completely unnatural, and I know why. I know it's jaundice. I know it's because his organs are failing. But the sun was coming through the windows in the corner of his house, and he was just glowing like this golden, skinny Buddha that was just wasting away. And I remember looking at him and going, man, he's dying. Like he's dying. He could go today. He could go tomorrow. And then it hit me. I'm dying too, right? I mean, we all are.
Yeah.
I haven't been diagnosed with anything, but I mean, I'm dying.
We all
And I
have
don't
an
know how.
expiration date. That's
Yeah,
right.
I don't know when, but it's happening. And so we spoke for like 3 hours, and that conversation was so powerful. I said, hey, the out of body stuff, is that still happening? He said, oh yeah, like multiple times a day. I can't control it at all. He said, but now I'm seeing things.
Like
I
what?
said,
Yeah.
that's what I said. What do you mean things? And he said, well, the first thing I saw was my cat from childhood. And he said, and I never even liked the cat. I said, oh, all right. And he said, but then I saw my grandma, and he was close with his grandma. And I said, what do you think this means, all this out of body stuff? And he said, the best I can figure is that there's something inside this broken machine that's getting ready to break out and stay out. And I thought that was kind of, and keep in mind, I should have set this up earlier, but I wouldn't call Chris an atheist, but close,
Agnostic,
right?
maybe.
Devout agnostic.
Gotcha.
Like, I mean, so just didn't go to church, wasn't a real spiritual guy, thought ghosts were kind of BS a little bit. He's like, ghosts, really? And not disrespectfully, but I'm like, that's okay. I don't need to convince anybody. And here he was talking about some of the most profound paranormal evidence that that anyone's ever experienced, and he's going through it. And something's getting ready to break out and stay out. And
I'm assuming when he referred to that, he meant his soul.
right, spirit, soul, whatever word you want to use. Yeah, there's his consciousness, right? Because to him, he was conscious. He was out of his body that nobody could argue was broken, right? Broken and breaking down and getting ready to shut down. And a few days later, he did indeed pass away. And that was, boy, that was hard. And the worst part, and it makes you feel selfish, when you say, boy, he's only a couple years older than me. That could be me. What am I going to do? Right. I'm in my midlife. Like, what can I still do? And it sounds selfish. I know. 'Cause like he just died. My nephew lost his father and all that. But it does make you feel and sense your own mortality when you lose someone close to you, especially someone who's too young.
Yeah, literally, just 2 years older than you. Now,
Yeah.
when Houdini died, his wife was doing that annual seance. If I'm not mistaken,
Yep.
it was on Halloween, right?
Yep.
And maybe do you know what the coded word was that she was looking for?
I don't.
Regardless, it was about 10 years, or on the 10th anniversary of, or 10th anniversary, or 10 years of doing the seances. She blew out the flame, and I forgot the exact words that she said. But essentially, Houdini never did contact her in the way that they had planned prior to his passing. Since Chris's passing, have you seen anything supernatural or something out of place, or had a feeling that he's around?
So my sister and he had worked out some signs that he would leave for her. And she claims, a couple she thinks she may have gotten. I always thought the sign would come through me because I know my sister. I've known her my whole life. And if he were to appear before her, fully clothed and in the living room and say, hey, Sue, how's it going? I'm okay. She would lose her ever-loving crap, right? Like, that wouldn't be good for her. And I think Chris would know that. So I said, I wonder if like the message would come from me. I didn't have anything happen until the summit, not even the summit, the edge of the top of the volcano of Kilimanjaro, when I had this just profound spiritual moment. And if I could just sort of set up leading up to it,
Of course.
it was we left Barafu base camp around midnight because it's 3 miles to the top from there. We're at 15,000 feet. We got to get to 19,341. It's going to be 3 miles, and it's going to take 8 hours to go that distance. It's slow going. And the difference between hiking at 8 and 9,000 feet is really negligible as far as breathing and altitude. But 15 to 16 is exponential, and 16 to 17 even worse. And it was about 3 a.m, and I was as cold as I've ever been. I mean, it was dark and frigid, and I had a balaclava on, which covers your whole face except your eyes. And I couldn't get enough air through that thin fabric. And so I'd pull the fabric down to breathe a little more. And I'm breathing as deeply as I can, but then my face would get so cold I'd have to cover it again. So I have to alternate between breathing and being warm. If you want to know what it's like, those little those stirring straws you get at the diner with your coffee, the little skinny ones? Yeah. Breathe through one of those. Just right. And now go for a jog, just breathing through one of those.
Oh, it'd be impossible. I'd pass out.
At some point, you have to slow down in order to get enough air through that teeny tiny little straw. And that is exactly what it's like to be up at altitude. Your only option is to stop or slow down until you can balance the oxygen that's coming into your system with the movement your body has to make. And it's like 3:30 in the morning, and I've had an inner dialogue in my head. It's for my whole life. This is just constant chatter, like working things out, pondering things, whatever. And around 3:30, those voices in my head just went silent. And I remember thinking, this is either very, very good or very, very bad.
3:30 a.m. You're talking, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that the time in general when people say that's like, for instance, if you're at in the middle of a graveyard at night, they talk about 3:30 as the time when things are supposed to happen, or when it's
the real witching hour. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So 3 a.m. is supposed to be that. But what time zone, right? I'm on Eastern. I'm in Africa. I don't know. Who can tell? So, but at that point, it got quiet. And I remember thinking, so the Maasai people who live on the Kenya side and even the Chaga people on the Tanzania side, they have a word for the top of Kilimanjaro that it means like the house of God, or where God dwells, because they believe only God is allowed up there and only those who God deems worthy. And, at that point, we're probably 17,500 feet, and I just couldn't breathe, and I didn't think I could go on. And I really, really struggled. But it's like 4:30. I see this little tiny light, way forever behind me on the horizon to the east, and I realized the sun is coming. Right? That's the first hint. And all right, let me just see the sunrise. And 4:30 it gets brighter, and 5:30 it gets even brighter, and then at 6:30 we reach a place called Stella Point, which is the very rim of the volcano, and there's still another 500 vertical feet to go, another half mile. And I turn around and I see this sunrise, and the whole world is warmed up 10, 15 degrees in minutes, and I just felt this immense presence around me, something huge. And I just felt this like welcoming feeling. And it was the most profound moment of the entire journey. It was just, I knew right there that I'm allowed to be here. And not only that, the summit, that's done. It's a foregone conclusion. But right then, I felt right next to me, Chris. I felt him right next to me looking at that sunrise. And he was just there and smiling. And call it whatever you want, oxygen deprivation, exhaustion. I felt him and that in this moment. And almost like, hey, you're here, you made it. And Chris is the last guy who would climb a mountain. Like, he really, he just wasn't. That was never his thing. But he was with me. It had nothing to do with the mountain. And that's where I felt him. And that, I think, was my kind of spiritual closure. Just a year and 3 months after his death.
I can imagine how profound that must have been, especially since you did it for him, and then at the time when you almost were not going to make it, you know, then comes the sun, and then all of a sudden, when it's at the beautiful sunrise,
Yeah.
warmer, that's when you actually feel him. And I'm assuming when you said, you know, he's happy, smiling, in peace as well. Obviously, clearly not in pain anymore because he's in the
No,
ethereal
yeah.
world.
Of course. And let me just correct one thing you said. Like I did it for him. That's I mean, I did it for me. Like let me just be totally honest. Like this was my bucket list, but absolutely he was a huge part of it. He was the cattle prod that got me to go now. He was the I raised money to help fight cancer in his memory and honor, and he was a huge part of it. I had pictures of him in my backpack. But you don't take something like that on. It doesn't even ring true to me to say you do something like that for someone else. Like that was my journey, and he was a huge part of it.
Quick technical question. You said you had
Sure.
2 health checks a day, right?
Yeah, they checked our O2
Yeah.
levels. They checked our heart rate. Are you pooping? Are you peeing? Are you sleeping? Are you eating? All that stuff.
Out of curiosity, in the last, few health checks you had, say 3, what was your oxygen level in the pulse ox readings?
Yeah, they got down into the 80s.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. See,
Well,
because I've had pneumonia. In a bad case of recurrent pneumonia, so I know my levels, and then of course from skydiving. And to me, once you start get lower than 94, particularly once you get below 90, that's when you're really starting to get dizzy.
yeah, it was, and that's near the top. I mean, and my resting heart rate's usually really good, and that's all elevated once you're at higher because your heart's literally has to pump faster to get enough oxygen around. So, and where I live in Massachusetts, I literally live like 200 feet above sea level. I mean, it's
Yeah.
I am not at altitude at all. So, it was something that I had to
It's
adjust
it's
to for
just
sure.
under 19,000 feet, if I'm not mistaken, from what you said or what I read, right? 18,900 something.
So at the rim of the volcano is about 18,800 feet. That the summit is 19,341.
Gotcha. And that's above sea level.
Yes, above sea level. Yep.
Now, what's the ground level? How many feet above sea level is the base of the mountain?
So, hmm, well, the base where we started,
Yeah.
which is not the base, but we started at like 7,500 feet, and so that was on the slope a little bit. So I
Well,
would
even that is high enough. I could tell you, for instance, in Colorado, there's a drop zone, and it's called mile high skydiving. Point
yep.
is when you jump out at
You just jump off
5,000.
the ground, right?
Yeah, pretty much. But
We're over
because
there.
they're 5,000 feet or over 5,000 feet above sea level, your regular parachute, say for instance, my current drop zones near in Los Angeles range between 700 to 1,500 feet above ground level, and my canopy. My main is 180 square feet. If I was to jump, same weight, same height, same experience in Colorado at that drop zone, I would have to rent a rig with approximately a 288 square feet. So I can imagine where you
Sure.
started at 7,500 feet, that must have been tough already on your body and the breathing and the heart.
So there's a mantra that it's a word, Swahili word that our guides would say over and over. Pole pole is the word, and it just means slow. That's all it means. And so they would say this over and over. And when we started on that first day, I could have gone much, much faster, double the speed easily, and been comfortable. But I also had nowhere else to be, like it's so on the one hand, I'm like, I'll just trust these guys because what do I win if I get to the camp first? Like nothing. So, but also I'm such a goal oriented guy, and I'm not saying that in a way to brag because you miss a lot along the way when you just focus on the summit. When you just keep your eye up top, you miss so much of the journey. And so two things: I had bought a really good camera before going over to Africa because I wanted to stop and literally not only smell the roses but take pictures of them. And it was a way for me to sort of slow down the journey. And these guys are just repeating, pole 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 pole, slow down. And in doing so, like, and then they'd say, "Hey, look over there in that tree," and there's monkeys in the tree, and you're like, "Wow, monkeys!" I mean, I've seen monkeys in zoos and elsewhere, but this is a monkey in the wild, and I mean, I'm on his turf. It was one of those like profound moments where you just go, "Yeah, there's no rush here." This the only thing to do is just to get to the next camp, just eat, sleep, walk. And one of the other things that happened to me that was profound that I didn't see coming was the first day when we started, I was so scattered. I'm worried about email, voicemail, the work I'm missing, my family back home. I mean, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no cell towers, there's nothing. But after like 2 or 3 days up there, there was like this inner quiet that just started settling on me. You know what I mean? I was like, what is that? Oh, like it's okay. The world will be okay without me. It'll still spin. My email will be there,
Yeah.
my voicemail will be there. And that was pretty calming.
I was going to say, how great was it for, after 20 years, 20 plus years of us using, cell phones, which obviously are now smartphones. How great was it to not have to check for texts, voicemails, and all that stuff while you're there? And because I have yet to have an experience where except when I personally turn off my phone and leave it at home and then go for a drive, but that's kind of seldom. I've yet to go, say, to another country and am in an area where I can, experience what you did, where you get away from the technology for a bit and actually live as we are supposed to be living with other humans personally, and not just looking at a screen all day.
It's so true. And I think that that was one of the best parts of the experience, was just unplugging and realizing how much we need that unplugging, to turn off the news, to turn off the internet, to turn off all of it. And it's so strange that once I did that, I felt so much more connected to myself. I was like, oh, wait, I'm in here too. And it was kind of nice to rediscover that.
There's a great picture that I'm showing right now, and you have your arms out, and you're clearly up on the journey because behind you, you could see the layer of clouds. At what point in the journey, if you recall, it's one of those that you
Yep.
emailed me. At what point in the journey is that?
We had just climbed the Barranca Wall, which is a 900-foot cliff. From a distance, it looks like a sheer cliff face, but it's actually, but it's not sheer, but it is steep. And that was one of my favorite parts of the climb, because it's real climbing. Like, you need your arms and your legs, and you're pulling yourself up over rocks. And there's one spot where they say, please kiss the rock, because you have to, get your body flat up against it to get up to the next trail. And if you fall backwards, good news, you're not going to be injured. You're going to die.
Yeah.
You're right. You don't have to worry about, a life of suffering. You're just going to die. But that was a really exciting part for me, because I love that. And there's mountains in New England that are like that, where not quite as high or as treacherous, but where you have to use your whole body. And what I love about going up a mountain like that is that nobody on Earth has ever taken the same exact path that I did. Now, yes, the same trail, sure, the same route, of course, but nobody is going to step in all the same footprints, touch all the same rocks that I did, right?
Stop and take all the pictures. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm having my own unique experience in this place, with thousands of others do it every year, but I'm having this unique experience. And I love that idea of making my own choices, like which way do I go when I get to the top. And like that, I had just got to the top, and my tent mate Brian actually took that picture, and the sun just came out, and like it was so warm, and it just felt amazing. And then there's the sea of clouds below you. It's so cool to see these views that you usually just see from an airplane.
Yes.
And to just be walking, and you're walking along this trail, and it looks like Tatooine in Star Wars, like there's just desolate, and then this cloud comes right where you are, and your visibility goes to like 5 feet, and you just keep walking the trail, and 20 seconds, 30 seconds later, it just drifts by, and your visibility's perfect again, and you're just like, wow. I mean, I literally was just hit by a cloud. And you've experienced that skydiving.
I have.
Them, and I mean, it's kind of wild to just be like, it's not there, then you're in the cloud, and then you're through it, and It's just you're among them, and that is so ethereal to just be in that space.
Especially when they look as beautiful and fluffy as they do there. It's like when I'm skydiving over clouds and it looks like you're gonna hit something solid, and then
Yeah.
you're like in there, and it's like it's air, and the only thing that happens when I come out, there might be a little bit droplets on my goggles of I guess I want to call it humidity because it's not really drizzle, but that's about it. Because you're above it, you're in, and you're out. So that's why I wanted to ask you about that. Now,
Yeah.
people who climb Mount Everest, I believe the average price is about 175,000, and just depending on which tours people take. For
A lot, yeah.
those who, yeah, exactly. For those who want to make the climb of Mount Kilimanjaro, what is the average cost?
So my trip, I would say realistically was about $6,000, $6,500 all in, everything, flight, gear, everything, the guides, the meals, totally all included. Um, and while I mean, that's a lot for me. Like I don't have that to throw around, like that's something I had to save for. But I also recognize like some people go on cruise ships and spend more than that per person, and just to have like the nicer room. So yeah, I would say about 6,500 was all in for that. The dollar goes a long, long way in Tanzania. In fact, every single place that we went to, be it a restaurant or a shop or whatever, would take either the U.S. dollar or the Tanzania shilling, which tells you that they have as much faith or more in our currency than their own.
So you almost didn't even need to go to a currency exchange.
No, yeah, they'd rather have the dollar if you gave them the choice. So,
Wow.
yeah, no, so it was, and I didn't really need much money. I'm not the kind of guy that like goes and buys a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I bought, like I really like their local tea, so I bought a bunch of that to bring home and give to friends. Like, hey, I drank this every day, and I bought some bandanas that were literally like $2. So I'm not one for like grabbing a bunch of souvenirs. So I didn't really need much, but it was yeah, it was amazing. And I feel like too sometimes you have to get outside your own country to get some perspective on the world
Oh,
and
I
see.
completely agree with that. We don't have perspective on the world if we're in the bubble of where we live all the time.
Right, because you think like everybody thinks and operates just like we do, and they don't. That's not what it's like.
Now, this other picture that I showed, and I'm going to put back up for people, is you're obviously, I'm assuming it's in the city. One building is a little taller than the other. I'm guessing, is it what,
That's
nine?
Moshi. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's what I wanted to ask you. Behind it is the mountain, right?
Yep.
So was this the first day you arrived there?
That's my first. So we got there late at night the night before, and you get to your hotel and you just kind of crash. You've been traveling for a long time, and that morning we had breakfast, and our hotel had this little like 3-story walk up, like where you can view the mountain. And so I went up there, and that's the first picture I took of Kilimanjaro in Africa, and that's the city of Moshi. So technically, by the way, that's where the hotel is. You're still on the mountain. I mean, it's considered the largest freestanding mountain in the world because, the Himalayas are made with plate tectonics launch the mountains, up toward the sky. This is a volcano. Technically, 3 volcanoes is Kilimanjaro. And by the way, they're dormant. Oh, well, the main one is dormant. It's not extinct. So that sort of added a layer.
Yeah.
If this goes off, that's that.
You're in trouble. You're serious
That's
trouble.
checkout time. Yeah, that's. Do you run or do you just like face it? I don't even know. Like I mean, so that was the first picture I took, and that's Moshi. That's the town of Moshi, which is where you would stay if you were going to climb Kilimanjaro.
Out of curiosity, did you see any base jumpers with wingsuits out there?
Nothing like that. Nope. The winds were so crazy. I don't know if that would be a good idea.
Oh,
Like
yeah, that wouldn't be.
yeah, so they come off the ocean, the Indian Ocean, and they hit the eastern side of the mountain, and then they do. We came up the western slope and then circumvented on the western side before coming up and doing the last push from the east, and so the winds just go in every conceivable direction. I got to believe that would be pretty dangerous.
There's a question here about these topics, and this is from Sasquatch Agency, which I know is Scott. He writes, did you ever have a feeling of fear while climbing the mountain?
Yeah, you know, A lot of it at the lower elevation is literally just a hike. It's not treacherous or dangerous. If you fall, you're just going to fall to the ground and get right back up. So that part, no. But once we got higher up, I remember passing the first plaque of where someone died. I had their name and memory of them and all that. Someone had obviously brought the plaque there and
Was it a
placed it.
long time ago, or like the last 10, 20 years, or?
Oh no, the last like 5 years.
Oh,
And
okay, so fairly recent.
yeah, and so you see that, and this was at about like 12,000 feet. And I remember I asked our guide, I said, 12,000 feet is typically not high enough to really kill you. I mean, I guess if you were super sensitive, but how did you get here if you're that sensitive? And that's when he said that was a lightning strike. And I went, oh, well, lightning, I've got my backpack on, I got metal poles, I got camera batteries, I got metal carabiners on me, and I'm like, the clouds move right through where we are, and some of them are sort of grayish in color. And I was like, well, if an electrical storm erupts around us, what do we do? And he said, you drop your pack and you hide behind a rock. And I went, oh, good. I'm glad there's a plan.
It doesn't sound like a very great plan, but it's better than nothing.
It's better than nothing. So that was sort of sobering. And then as we got up to the higher elevations and started pushing to the summit, you pass other plaques where other people had died. And again, these are often in the last decade, and all very American sounding names, right? Like John Smith's and,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is about as American as you can get, literally.
Yeah, and you're just looking and you're like, oh my goodness, like someone died here because they couldn't handle the altitude. And it had their age too. It had the year they were born and the year they died. And I was like, 48. Oh, 48 years old, died right here. How old am I again? And I'm like, I'm not that far from that. And so that's a little, it's sobering.
Very,
else.
I would think,
yeah.
Very sobering.
Yeah, you're just like, oh, people do die up here, and it was a stark reminder. So that part, I think my biggest fear for most of the journey was not making it to the top, because I would just be so disappointed. But then, there weren't. I never felt like my life was in peril, even when I couldn't breathe. I was just scared I'd have to go back. I probably should have been more scared, but I wasn't.
There's a follow-up question from Sasquatch Agency, writes, what was the best part about your climb?
That sunrise. That sunrise at the rim. Not even the summit. By the time we get to the summit, that's like, you've played the game and you get the trophy after. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not about the trophy. That's just the trophy. You take your picture there, you get to bring that home. Yay, look at me. But that sunrise was so profound, because I was like all out of hope. Just 2-3 hours earlier, my hope tanks were empty, and that sunrise just completely refilled them. And I took a picture of it. I had it made into postcards and prints, and I still look at it every day. It hangs in my living room, and I remember thinking, like, wow, the whole idea of just this hope renewed in something as simple as a sunrise, this thing that's literally been happening for billions of years, since before people were around to even see it. It's this boring, mundane thing that happens day in and day out, and yet is like this amazing reminder that no matter how crappy today is, tomorrow I get a whole other chance to try again. And that was, I think, just my best takeaway, was to just be like, some days suck, and tomorrow that sun is going to rise again and give us and me a whole nother chance at this again, to just take another stab at it.
Now, this might be a good segue into paranormal, because this question here relates to your journey and a part of paranormal. This is from Mystic Q. Asks, did you see any UFOs while on that trip?
I did not, but I got to tell you, when the second night we were on the mountain, we were at a place called Shira Plateau, which was technically the first volcano. There was Kilimanjaro's 3. This was the first to blow literally 1 million years ago. And now it's just this plateau and the camp's there. And that night, as the sun set, there were no clouds. And I have never in my life seen a clearer sky. And we're just like hitting each other in the arm, like, look up. Oh, mouth hanging wide open. The Milky Way right there. I mean, the Southern Cross, constellation. I can't see that in the Northern Hemisphere. It's only in the Southern, and there's the Southern Cross, and you can see planets, and you can see every twinkling star in the sky. I've never in my life seen a sky so clear. No light pollution, no sound pollution, no pollution. And it did occur to me, I'm like, if ever I was going to get to see a UFO, right?
It would have been then, that's for
That was
sure.
it. Because here's the thing, small planes don't fly up there. It's too high. And the jet airliners don't typically go over the mountain. It's too much turbulence. They go around it. So like there's nothing above you. If you see something, you probably see something.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Like you said, they wouldn't go over because the rotors that happen from the wind slamming into the mountain, that sort of, I wish people could see what I'm essentially doing, but the turbulence that kind of causes, like, for instance, a base jumper, right, jumping off a building, the wind that hits the building rolls upwards on that building in a fashion where it's like a snowball in reverse, and it'll collapse your canopy. So I can imagine why no plane would want to fly over that, just for the same reason, because that turbulence, can do anything from shear a wing off to a lot more than that. Now, obviously completing this very spiritual journey and coming back refreshed after being unplugged, did you change any of your perspective on your life's work? Say, for instance, did you ever go back and look at another case that you've maybe cleared or wrote about or even did an episode about, and now brought some sort of new, I guess, angle approach to look at it based on what you experienced with your brother-in-law and this journey?
So when Chris passed, it was a good reminder that every ghost is someone's Chris.
Yes.
Right? I mean, and so I always took the stories seriously. I did. Like, I always try to, for me, exploring a haunt is to not only honor the past, but connect to it. And a place is haunted because there's some inherent lesson that we have not learned. And that's not my opinion, right? Like, I would never have heard the place was haunted unless some community kept that haunt alive, unless someone told the story and retold the story, because we're still reckoning with something. And so I think it was a solid reminder to just be like, hey, that's someone's family. And it's still an important story to tell, but tell it with respect. It's just a good reminder.
Can you tell us a couple of incidents or examples of what you just said, of cases where you went to a haunt and you mentioned lessons? Like, what kind of lessons would some of these haunts want us to learn?
Sure. So, like, an example I like to use is like the Lizzie Borden house in Fall River, Massachusetts. That place is haunted. Whether you believe in ghosts or not is irrelevant. It's haunted because 2 people were murdered and no one was ever punished for it. Let that sink in, right? We don't like that. We don't like that in our society.
Yeah, we want justice, yeah.
We want justice because we know, hey, that could have been my parents. Those could have been my friends, my neighbors, could have been me. And I want justice. I want the person punished. And no one was ever punished for that. That will haunt us for as long as we remember it. And so when you go into that house, and of course it looks like it did in 1892, and the decor is like it was, and the crime scene photos are in the same rooms where the people got hacked to death, all that stuff combines, and it chills us. It haunts us. We connect and we imagine, well, gosh, what Andrew and Abby Borden, what must it have been like that last day? Lizzie Borden, who I suspect was at the very least very much in on it, but probably also, guilty of the crime. What was her life like? Why did she do it? To what end? What was the rest of her life like? That just haunts us. It goes over and over. Every legend that sticks around has an inherent reason to do so because of that town. There's a restaurant in a town near me that's haunted by the ghost of a little girl. The restaurant was built because the guy got a tip that the railroad was coming in. And he builds this inn, and everyone's like, you're crazy. Why are you building an inn in the middle of nowhere? And then, boom, within a year, the railroad comes through, and now he's a genius, right? And
wow.
He knew, right? He had the inside track. That's insider trading, old school, right? Like,
yeah, literally.
That's all it is. It's just like he got a good tip, and he made a move, and it paid off. The railroad tracks, to this day, the Boston commuter line goes right by the building, 20 feet. If you're sitting in there eating dinner and the commuter train goes by, the whole place rumbles. There's a little girl's ghost who's seen throughout the building. And when you go back in time, you learn a little girl was hit by the train and brought to the closest building, this one, where she died. And that's sad and it's tragic. And it's a reminder that you can get hit by a train. That can still happen. You can get hit by a car. It's this cautionary tale that we're happy to tell, especially to our kids, right? You know, hey, let's take you to dinner at this old restaurant. Did you know it's haunted by the ghost of a little girl? Let me tell you why it's haunted by the ghost of a little girl. Because she got hit by a train. Or, you know, and then the kid looks outside, sees the train go by and shudders a little bit and says, I'm staying away from that train. I don't want to haunt this place. And as a parent, you go, good, right? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, ghost. Thank you so much for helping me with scaring my kids straight. We do it all the time. You know, murder scenes, Black Dahlia out there in LA, right? How many places does she haunt? You know, you have Black Dahlia tours, right? I mean, in LA.
Yeah.
And why? Because you had this young woman,
beautiful woman too. Yeah.
Yep, young beautiful woman who was just trying to make it in LA and was literally hunted down. And you don't think that still happens today? Of course it does. So yeah, long live the ghost of the Black Dahlia, because who knows how many people she's kept safe. That ghost, right? So on the most mundane level, these stories, we connect to them. I truly believe that, and I'm not trying to sound like some woo-woo psychic or whatever, like we summon these spirits because we need them. You know, we conjure them up. We remember them. We pull them from the past to the present because we need them. Even if we don't fully understand why, we still need them.
I just found not too long ago, I think it was post last interview I had with you, that Robert the Doll was the basis for the movie Chucky. And
okay, yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, Robert the Doll is in Florida, where I think it's in the Keys, right?
Yes, Key West.
Okay. Can you tell us what you know about Robert the Doll?
So Robert the Doll is this spooky old doll that's under glass in a museum in Key West. And the story goes that you're not supposed to take pictures of Robert the Doll unless you ask him before you click your picture. And then apparently it's okay. What sign he gives you, I'm not sure that it's okay to take a picture, but you should ask. And you know, people that don't seem to be cursed by him and haunted by him and so on. And yeah, I've heard that too, that Chucky the doll was sort of taken
loosely
there,
based, yeah.
Loosely based. But then Annabelle the doll from the Ed and Lorraine Warren, which was in the Conjuring movie, I mean, that story was going around long before Chucky too. So, you know, I'm sure they heard various tales.
And that's the one that scares me the most.
Annabelle?
Yeah.
Scares me even more. I met Annabelle.
Yeah. Ooh, maybe you could tell us about that experience.
Sure.
I'm blanking on the name of the person who has her in custody. Maybe you can refresh me.
Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Well, somebody else. It wasn't quite them. It wasn't
Tony Spera.
him. No. Yes, Tony.
Yeah.
That's who I had. Okay. Anyway, so you saw it at the Warrens?
So I grew up. The Warrens lived in Monroe, Connecticut, and I grew up in Sandy Hook, Connecticut. I was the next town over, and so I knew them since I was about 12 years old. And so, you know, they're local celebrities, local ghost hunters, and would go see their programs in the fall and all that. And when I started working for newspapers, my very first haunted writing was a feature on them in, I think, 1997. Right, that's how long I've been writing about the paranormal. And so I got to go to the museum, go to their house, and I met Annabelle the doll. Annabelle the doll, the real one, freaked me out probably more than most people because, number one, it's a Raggedy Ann doll.
Ah.
And I was scared because my sister had the same one on her bed growing up. That's the same exact doll. And
I wouldn't want to come back and see your sister after I ran into Annabelle.
I was like, oh, Sue, you're not going to believe what Annabelle looks like. So, you know, and the reason the movies show her as this, like, well, first of all, Raggedy Ann is all kinds of registered trademarks, but also not that scary looking. It doesn't match the story. So they had this great antique, creepy doll that you see in the movie, and that became Annabelle. But there's a great Easter egg. If you watch the first Conjuring movie where they're going through the antique store, the camera pans and there's a Raggedy Ann doll on the top shelf. It's just super. It's like a second, but I remember going like, "Oh, that's the real one," or that's like the real one.
I'm gonna have to actually, when I go, because I have that movie, I'm gonna have to go back and watch it and look for that Easter egg, because what a great reference. And it wasn't until, well, actually no, because it was after Tony Sparrow that I saw what Annabelle really looked like, and that did scare me more because even though I hadn't seen Conjuring yet, I had seen the portrayal of the doll, and I did sort of expect it to be maybe a porcelain type of doll, maybe not freaky looking, but something like that. I didn't expect it to be Raggedy Ann, and I think that adds to the horror of it because, and Raggedy Ann looks so innocent. It's a kid's story, like you said. Your sister had her, so the fact that that's what causes razor sharp scratches on you with nightmares and possibly a deadly car accident. I think that's one of the reasons that Annabelle scares me so much.
Well, the other thing too about it is, right, so and this gets down to like the nature of fear and all that other stuff. So if you saw the Annabelle doll like in the movie and that was in a toy store, would you ever buy it for yourself or for your kid or for your grandkid
Never.
or your niece or your nephew?
No
Never.
way.
It's the freakiest looking thing you've ever seen. Raggedy Ann, though, you might be like, oh, she's cute and cuddly and soft. So, the devil in sheep's clothing, like that's more frightening because it doesn't look the part and your guard is down. And that's what scares us, right? My guard would be down with Raggedy Ann. My guard would never be down with the Annabelle doll from the movie. I'd be like, get that thing out of here. I don't even want to see it. And that's the nature of, when you look at the way haunts are portrayed in movies, it's so interesting because, Eddie Murphy made the best joke about it like years ago. And here I am just freely ripping him off where he's like, you walk into the house and the house is like, get out, and blood's coming out of the wall and it's trying to eat you. And you're like, too bad we can't stay, baby. And the movie's over, right? In 30 seconds, that's the end of the movie. Real haunts are subtle. Weeks go by and nothing happens. And that is a lot more frightening because your guard is down. You think, well, maybe it's over. Maybe it was just in my head anyway, and it's been a month. Nothing's happened. I can relax. And then you hear those footsteps.
I was just going to say, do you think that it's intentional that they wait for your guard to be down before they start to act?
You're asking me to try to understand the nature of something that I can't. I've never been dead. I don't know. Or whether it's torment, whether they're tormenting you because they view you as on their turf, or whether it's literally like it takes a certain amount of energy and then they got to recharge. I don't know. I really don't know. But what I do know is there's no haunt without a person, a living person. Right? A ghost can't exist without a human witness, a living human witness. Even if that witness is on a closed circuit TV, right? We are still part of that equation. And I can't say enough that I believe we play a huge role in these hauntings. Amityville House. I got to interview George Lutz. It was the last big interview he gave before he died, about everything that happened in that Amityville House. From the summer of '75 right through the third movie that had just come out by the time I had interviewed him. And, the stuff he described was nowhere near even Jay Anson's book and nothing like the movies, but subtle and scary. And the reality is 6 people were murdered in that house by their brother/son. Like, he just died, by the way, like a couple months ago. He just died in prison, Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr. So that happened. And this family moved in, and it was just the most frightening 28 days of their life, so they say. And then after they move out, another family lives there for years and claims there were no problems at all. And I'm not calling that family a liar, right? Maybe they are not tuned into it. Maybe they are blissfully unaware and not open or receptive. And so the stars don't line up for them and their house is not haunted. But someone else could move in there and it would be, off the charts again, because we are a component in all of this stuff. You can't talk about a haunting without also talking about the living witnesses in it.
Have you ever been to Skinwalker Ranch or Stardust Ranch?
I have not, but I would love to go sometime.
If you decide to go to Stardust Ranch, let me know. The owner, when I interviewed him, said, of course, we can visit if we want to. Just be very grounded when we get there because that place is very active back. Skinwalker Ranch, I don't think I can have access to. But the reason I brought it up is based on what you just said, how the first family has all sorts of experiences, and the second family has none. That was sort of the same case with Skinwalker Ranch. You had the first family, well, the modern day family, it was the Shermans, and they had some of the most frightening experiences, from ghosts to Sasquatch to UFOs to trickster ghost things. Like, for instance, the wife went shopping with groceries and she put everything away, left the kitchen for a couple seconds, came back, and everything's back in the bags. Different stuff like that. Well, they sell it to Robert Bigelow, the billionaire. NIDS goes there, and it takes quite some time before, wormholes start appearing in the sky, and crafter, giant, weird, necklace, 8-foot tall black creatures with large eyes crawling in and out of these tunnels. And then more recently, the newest people that live there, under Brandon Fugel, have yet to experience any of the biggest of these problems that have been going on for 25 years. So it is kind of relative, like you mentioned, on each case in each area.
And like I said, we are part of it. We are part of the equation always in any paranormal encounter, right? And I look at the way the UFO sighting scale works, right? It all has to do with like the first kind, second kind, third kind, and on, right? Yeah. So it all has to do with how affected the witness is. If you just see some strange lights go by, that's the first kind, right? Like it's just something you saw, didn't really affect you. So the more it affects you, the higher up, all the way down to like abduction, right? Like that would be the most extreme case. So I mean, I think that's a good way to look at all paranormal activity, right? There's the innocuous ghost, the strange footsteps that you go, okay, whatever, house is haunted, good night, right? And then there's the I'm really affected by this, and it's affecting my well-being and mental well-being and health even, because that's what happens with any of these things, any of these subjects. They can get under your skin, but you are part of the equation. How you let it in or don't let it in, how you summon it or don't, all affects the phenomena.
One benefit of being a ghost hunter in 21st century is the technology you and your teams and everybody else has been using is drastically changed. Now, because I have yet to go on an official hunt, just a couple of the tours of, like you mentioned, here in Los Angeles and in San Diego, and of course Queen Mary, can you talk to us about some of the technology that's now changed and that offers you an ability to capture more than, say, just a regular camera 25 years ago?
Yeah, so I'm not a fan of the equipment. I don't use it anymore. That's me, though, and I'm an outlier for sure. I'm more interested in the story and the history, because that's the thing that you can't dispute so much. But one thing that's interesting is that in some regards, ghost hunting has not evolved one iota in 100 years. And my example of that is Harry Price, the original ghost hunter, 1928 or so. He wrote the book Confessions of a Ghost Hunter. British guy who was investigating haunts, and part of his equipment was like galvanometers. He was measuring static charges in the rooms because a psychic told him that this brand new phenomena called electricity, which is not new, but it was being harnessed and becoming a household thing, could explain all psychic activity. So he said, okay, well, we have devices that can measure electricity, therefore that must be it. And we've been running on that premise ever since. It might be right, by the way. I can't tell you it's wrong. It could actually be correct. But I'm just saying we haven't changed any sort of thinking on that in over 100 years. So, but the way things have advanced, number one, your eye can only discern, so many frames per second. Your eye can also only see the visible light spectrum. So even your cell phone camera is so much faster than your eye can see. So if something's flitting around at like 200 frames per second, the equivalent of, your eye can't see it move, but your cell phone camera could stop things at 1,000th of a second, and then better cameras can do even better than that. We also have infrared, which is looking into a part of the spectrum that your eye just can't see. So if this energy is just at the very edge, like maybe a little bit into the infrared or maybe a little bit into the ultraviolet, we have cameras that can look there. And we have devices that can sense that part of the electromagnetic field. So, maybe just maybe if this stuff is energy and it's moving around, that, we do have devices that can get triggered by those. So it is interesting to me, but it's just a data point. You know what I mean? It's not the same as seeing an apparition or hearing a voice call out in the dark and saying, what was that? Me watching the temperature drop by 2 degrees and an EMF spike of 3 milligauss. I don't know. Like there's a lot of things that can cause that, but not, that aren't necessarily ghostly.
How many times in your life have you physically seen an apparition?
I can definitely count on one hand.
Still, that's a lot more than most people can count.
But I've been doing this 25 years, like all over the world, like, hardcore as my job, so yeah, really three apparitions that I would say that those are apparitions. And that's, and out of how many places I've been in,
hundreds
and hundreds,
yeah.
hundreds, and so my expectation, by the way, when I go into a location is that nothing will happen, and that's okay. Like, I don't expect it to. My expectation is I'm going to be in a historic building. I'm going to look around. I'm going to get to check this place out, and if something happens, then that's
it's a bonus. It's the cherry.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Now, what's your personal take on why ghosts haunt or stay? Okay, I could understand why, for instance, Patty Negri said it best to me. Big in life, big in afterlife. So if you loved, say, your musical instrument or loved being in a nightclub of some sort, maybe that's where you're going to spend eternity. But on the other hand, some people talk about passing away and seeing glimpses of heaven or hell. Usually it's heaven. Do you think that the ghosts that tend to stick around here have the ability to go into heaven and back, if you believe in a heaven or an afterlife or a place? Or do you think that they're just in this other dimension that we can't see but also exist here, which, if that's the case, there would be billions of them, considering how many thousands of years of history we've had?
Yeah, I think, again, this is coming back to us summoning them. There's a Mexican proverb that says we all die 3 deaths. The first death happens when your body expires. The second death happens when your body is laid into the ground. But the third and final death comes somewhere down the road, and that happens when your name is uttered for the last time.
Oh, interesting.
So your ghost will stick around as long as we remember you. Even if we don't know your name, if we know enough about you, we will summon you. We will keep you around. I don't necessarily subscribe to the notion of earthbound spirits because I've never found a place that's haunted all the time. If I did, I would buy it and I would charge you a ridiculous sum of money to come see my ghosts.
Yeah, I would too. I'd be a customer all the time.
I'd be like, ready? I'm going to open the door. Did you pay? You paid, right? You paid. Did we got all the money? Okay, ready? Here's the door. Wave. There she is. Wave. Right? It's so like, but I can't promise such a thing. So therefore I will never own such a business, and I am doomed to be middle class at best. I won't be rich, but I think these things come and go through factors that we don't fully understand, but I do believe we are part of the factor, us living people. When I walk into the Lizzie Borden house, and I've been there a lot, I'm summoning Andrew Borden and asking who did it. I'm summoning Abby Borden. I'm summoning Lizzie Borden and saying, why'd you do it? Who did it if not you? Who was in on it with you? And there they get called up again, their names still being uttered, far from the last time. And they come back, whether it's just in my head or in some way conjured up and then dissipate once I leave. I don't know. So I truly believe that some people, if they left a big impression in life, then sure. I mean, we still talk about Elvis. We talk about Michael Jackson. We still talk about Shakespeare. I've been in front of his house in England. I took a selfie in front of it. I'm like, hey, I'm a writer too. Oh, anyway,
that's cool. I've never. Where in England is it, by the way? Because each time I've been there, I've never thought to go. No one brought it up.
It was Stratford upon Avon, and it's just this little downtown, and you're like, that's his house, and there's a little sign, and this was Billy's house, and so it's not some sprawling mansion or anything like that. It's just a humble house downtown, and so I thought it was just cool to be like, Shakespeare still haunts us. How many times has that guy been ripped off?
Oh,
right? Like
Jesus, yeah. More
like
than I can even possibly fathom.
yeah. Imagine if he still got royalties, he'd be like the richest man alive.
He'd
But
be a trillionaire,
so yeah,
minimum.
so Mozart is still around, Bach is still around. You know, like the great artists who we still Socrates, right? I mean, we still mention these greats from history. Tutankhamun still haunts us, right? I mean, we think about these amazing figures who have this lasting impression. And at some point they might go away, by the way. I mean, they might. There's a reason. Why is it, we hear about ghosts that go back to like the mid 1800s. Much further back than that, not so much, because we don't feel any connection to them. You don't hear about ghosts from 300-400 years ago because it's just too distant. We don't feel that. But Civil War, yeah, that's still close enough. But a day will come when that's not. Another 100 years from now, we may never talk about Civil War ghosts anymore, which is a shame because
You
good
make a
God.
good point because I hear a lot, and I've seen a lot of great videos and photographs from Civil War ghosts, but I've yet to see one of the Revolutionary War. So maybe it's because, like you said, the time has passed and it's Civil War that we're thinking about, and in 100 years we won't be thinking about Civil War the way that we don't think of the Revolutionary War as much as we do about the Civil War.
Exactly. We can't relate. So, uh, we may have had great great grandparents that fought in the Civil War, but like, and we might have had relatives in the Revolutionary War too, but that's another 100 years before that, so it just gets to be too far back. Think about cemeteries, once someone's been in the ground 10, 20, 30 years, no one visits that grave anymore,
That's
unless they're
true.
famous, if they're famous, they might. But otherwise, it's just like, yeah, that's, I mean, I have never been to the graves of anything beyond grandparents, right?
Neither have I. Yeah, I think the most, at a historical cemetery, which is still a modern day, I think the absolute latest I've seen someone that had passed was like in the 40s or 50s. And like you said, who does visit there? Who goes now, still to this day?
Right. Yeah, because I mean, and I live in New England. I mean, I've got a cemetery down the street from me where people are from the 1700s. They're buried there, but I don't know them. Like I just glance and go, oh, how cool. That's an old one. Like, and I keep walking. I couldn't even tell you their name. I just see the date and go, oh, man, been in the ground a while. So it's not my family, and so I'm not there to visit them. I'm just passing by. So yeah, it's we don't feel that, we lose the connection, and that person is now resting at peace, right? And so I did a book about the ghost of the White House once. It's called Who's
Oh,
Haunting the White House, and the ghost of Lincoln comes up again and again. And I thought about this. I was like, look, hands down, the Lincoln presidency was the most difficult ever, ever, ever. There's not
Civil
even
War, slavery, 13th Amendment,
I mean,
assassination.
his son died while he
Yeah.
was in the White House, right? Like nobody had it tougher than Lincoln. Nobody ever, not even close. And so I remember seeing an interview with George H.W. Bush, the elder Bush, the first one, and he said, he was sort of new in office as president. He had to send some troops into harm's way, and he was really struggling with the decision. And he said, and then I thought about what Lincoln went through, and I said, okay, I can get through this. George Bush, I guarantee you, summoned the ghost of Lincoln. I don't mean getting in some like crystal ball or Ouija board or anything like that. I just mean that he summoned the spirit of this benchmark, right? This thing he needed. Like, please, President Lincoln, stand next to me, show me how bad it can be, and that I can get through this. And I think any president that has any sort of understanding or appreciation of history they've all summoned Lincoln. They've all thought about what he went through as the benchmark for how bad this job can be. And God willing, right, will never be that bad again.
On the topic of Lincoln, one of my favorite stories is the dream that he apparently had the night before he was assassinated. That apparently he told his wife. I don't know if it was written in a journal. I read this in the 80s. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. So he had a couple visions that were related. The first one happened when he looked into a mirror and he saw like a different version of himself, and that sort of freaked him out. And this was shortly before his death. But the prophetic dream was that he walked into the White House, and there was some kind of state funeral going on. And he walked up to one of the soldiers stationed there, and he said, who's died? And the soldier said, well, the president, sir. and he woke up and he told Mary Todd about that dream. And then the night that he went to the Ford's Theater, he had a personal bodyguard that, he had always said, good night to him. There was always this very formal way of, bidding him good day. And he said that night, he said goodbye. He never said goodbye. He always said good evening, good night, good day, but he never ever said goodbye. And that night he did.
It's like prophetic last words that he almost knew that he wasn't coming back.
He knew, yeah. But I mean, and you could say like, wow, that's profound. Keep in mind, the nation's at war with itself, and half of the nation really hates the guy and would like to kill him. Like literally trying to kill him, like fighting battles to try to get close enough to kill him. So he knew people wanted him dead. A lot of people wanted him dead. And so that must have just been so hard to live with. And then, you lose your son, and his wife was, she was holding seances in the White House, and that was tough on him. And it was a rough time. So that building has so many stories to it. And so many decisions have been made inside that building that have affected the whole world. It's a powerful place. And I was fortunate. I got to go there. I got to interview some of the staff. And when they just...
What year did you go?
I went 2007, I
so
believe.
During Bush Jr.'s.
Bush Jr., yeah. George W. Bush was president. Although that was totally irrelevant in that I dealt with the White House, not the administration.
Yeah. The actual staff that works
staff.
there regardless of the administration.
That's right. Yeah, there's about 100 employees that work for the White House, and it doesn't matter which political party's in power, like the butlers, the cleaning crew, the groundskeepers, like those folks stay. Presidents come and go, but they stay. And they were just so matter of fact about their ghosts because there's no political price to play. You can't fire them. Like you can't do anything, like they're bulletproof. And incredible patriots and incredible witnesses, like one guy, I met a third generation White House butler.
Wow.
His dad was a butler at the White House. His dad's dad was a butler at the White House. And one of the foremen said, he walked upstairs early in the morning to turn the lights on, which was part of his duties. And there's President Lincoln sitting outside the Lincoln bedroom.
Whoa.
And he comes downstairs and tells one of the assistant ushers what he had just seen. And he said, yeah, you're one of many to have seen him. Now, you could say, presidents have talked about seeing ghosts of the White House, but we don't drug test presidents. We don't psychologically evaluate presidents. We don't background check them. They could be crazy on drugs and criminals, and they can be president. But if you're the foreman of the White House, if you're a butler, you are drug tested, psych screened,
all of the above, yeah.
All of it, right? You are as reliable a witness as has ever stood in that building. You know what I mean? Because you're around the president, the first family, foreign heads of state, political leaders, and so on. And so if the president says they see a ghost, who knows? But if the butler does, I'm in. I believe you, right? And so it was cool to talk to some of them.
What you said a little while ago about that a ghost will stick around until you utter their name the final time, that answers the question of why the two questions that I've asked of every ghost hunter, which I believe I asked you 2.5 years ago, is end of 2018, which is one, have you ever come across a ghost that speaks a dead language, or two, have you ever come across a ghost of an extraterrestrial? And the reason why it turns out, from based on what you just told me, the reason why I don't get very many yes answers of a ghost with a dead language is because obviously if the ghost has a dead language, that must be so far in the past that obviously we're not talking about them or even thinking about that spirit. So that would make sense why
I can't relate.
Yeah.
Right. If you forget dead language, you could speak a live language that I don't understand, and I still can't relate. Although that's not true. I can still relate to a human being who may have lived or died or worked in a certain location, because I live and work in locations, and I can sort of grasp what that must be like. Extraterrestrial, no, I haven't. But I mean, at the same time, this comes down to labels. Someone perceives what they call a demon or an incubus or a succubus. That's them using their lexicon and interpreting something that doesn't make sense the best way they know how and coming up with that word. A different witness would come up with alien, right? I always thought old Hag Syndrome, which is pretty common in the paranormal. It's when you're asleep, you wake up and you're paralyzed. You can't move.
Sleep paralysis. Yeah, I get
Sleep
that all the
paralysis.
time. When your body wakes up before your eyes pop open,
Right.
and your mind's awake, but your body's still numb.
So some people will also see like a dark mass coming toward them, sit on their chest, and they can't breathe. They're panicked, and then it's over. Now, one person will say that's temporary sleep paralysis combined with a hypnagogic hallucination, which is literally a leftover dream that you still see. Another person will say that's a demonic attack. It's an incubus or succubus that's literally coming to attack your soul or spirit. And someone else will say that's a gray alien paralyzing you, and you were almost abducted. All three identical experiences interpreted three different ways by three different people.
Have you ever come across any cases where ghosts in the afterlife have solved their own murders?
Well, sure. I mean, you hear that's the ultimate unfinished business, right? Like
Yes.
that trope. And again, I will say again, the unfinished business has little to do with the dead and everything to do with us. The unfinished business is we, the living, have not solved your murder. And that's our shortcoming. We owe you that. You know what I mean? Even if I didn't know you, like I could see how like any one of us would want to take up the case, right?
Of
I mean, if we
course.
felt like we could solve someone's murder, like of course we should help if we could. I would want someone to do it for me or my family. And so, yeah, I mean, you hear stories about like messages coming through psychics, mediums, Ouija boards, like this whole notion of crying out, find my body, find my killer. I mean, I haven't worked on any of those cases, but you do hear about them, especially from psychic mediums who claim they work with police and help find those missing bodies and so on.
What's your take on Ouija boards? I have three right behind me. I can't really find anyone who wants to use one, but I've had
I'll
another.
use it with you.
Yeah, so I need you to meet me here in LA, or I'll come to the East Coast. But
Yeah.
I have one good friend. He's in Arizona. He also is. Some people might know him as Goof On, and he's had some terrifying experiences that he's told me that have made me question. What I'm doing, but obviously that's not going to stop me from using them. Have you experienced anything bad with Ouija boards, or is there any precautions you would advise anyone of what to do or say to not invite something that would be harmful?
Well, you have to be ages 8 and up. The box clearly says so. So if you're under age 8, no Ouija boards.
Yeah, that part we got.
No, so here's the thing. A Ouija board has all the power that you give it. And so for me, it's cardboard and plastic. Um, it's a psychic tool. You are the psychic. There's nothing magical in that cardboard and plastic, nothing at all. You are the compass. That's just the needle. And so I think we all have these sort of psychic abilities and intuitions, and using a Ouija board allows us to put ourselves into the right context to tap into it. Same way as if like I took you into a graveyard at midnight, you would suddenly get really psychic because you're a little scared and you're like, oh my gosh, what could be around us? Or if I took you to an old haunted building, in the middle of the night, same idea. You are opening up a side of yourself that's always there. It's just now you're in the right context. And the Ouija board's the same thing. Some people, when they open themselves up, they don't know what's going to come through, and it can be really scary. Those people should avoid them. They should stay away. If you are that hypersensitive to any sort of notion of anything otherworldly, then yeah, a Ouija board's probably not for you. But for me, there's really no difference between like trying to do an EVP or electronic voice phenomenon, try to record a spirit voice, or trying to get a message through a Ouija board. The only difference is a Ouija board makes a lot more sense to me. If I were dead and I was somehow able to help your hands move the planchette, I know how to spell. I'm a writer. I could send you messages. But like if you have like a radio that's just scanning like the spirit box, I don't know how to manipulate radio waves to get you a message. Maybe I learned that through some magic school when I die. But today I couldn't do it. But I could get you a message on the Ouija board. That one just makes more sense to me.
And me, of course, too, obviously for obvious reasons, because
Right.
it's letters and numbers.
It's letters and numbers. And I'm a little more pragmatic. So for me, no, I have not had any bad experiences with them, but I sure have heard from a lot of people who have, because they're petrified of the thing. I would say this too. If there's anything you're afraid of, for example, if you're really afraid of a gun, maybe firing the gun is not a great idea. right? Because you're not gonna be able to be. I mean, if you're firing a weapon like that, you should have some confidence, some training, some safety, and know what you're doing, so nobody gets hurt. That's not supposed to get hurt. Um, if you're afraid of it, just stay away.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. Now, what age was your first paranormal experience that thwarted you into the career you've gone down to, the
Oh,
path you've chose?
I had already chosen the path. That's the crazy thing. I didn't see my
Oh,
first ghost till after. I mean, I had friends that lived in old houses, built in the 1700s, and they said, "Yeah, the house is haunted. What are you going to do? It's some old guy lives here. We see him from time to time." No one was scared. Just a quirk of the house. And I thought, how interesting. And then Ed and Lorraine Warren as a child, and then I started writing, in my teens and 20s for newspapers, and I loved the Halloween feature story. I love looking for haunts. So I was already writing about ghosts, but I hadn't really had my own encounter. I did have a UFO sighting back
oh,
in 1985.
same year I had my first sighting.
That was cool, but that was different, right? That was a UFO. This craft flew over the house, and my dad was the one he was outside. He's like, "Get out of here right now." I'm 11 years old. I run outside. It's like, "There's a UFO." I'm like, "You're crazy." And I look up and I went, "Oh my God." This ring of lights, we watched it for like a minute and a half, which is an eternity, right?
Yeah, for UFO for sure.
It's forever. And the next day it was on the front page of the local paper, over 100 phone calls about this craft. Everybody saw it. So, and the official explanation was it was a group of Cessnas, single engine airplanes,
Oh,
flying in
jeez.
formation. But a local airplane pilot actually had a camera. A minute and a half was enough time for me to have run in the house, find our camera, run outside, and take a picture. I could have done it, but at the time I was just thinking I'd rather watch it and didn't know when it would end. So, but this guy did get a picture, and when you see it, and it's online, Randy Eddings, I-84 corridor of Connecticut, like 1985 UFO photo. You can look at that. I can't promise you there's little green men in it, but I can promise you that's not a group of Cessnas. you know?
Yeah, yeah. That's one thing that fortunately post 2017 is I don't think we're going to see a lot more of that, total BS of excuses of said Cessnas or swamp gas or ball lightning. At least we're in an era now where the Air Force and Pentagon and DoD are finally starting to say this is not natural phenomenon. These are F-18 pilots that saw these, recorded these, submarines saw them whizzing by, etc. And these are in fact technology. So that's why I think we're fortunate to be in this time. But like you said, in '85, that's exactly what they would have said. Or weather
Yeah.
balloon. That's what I was told. What I was
Weather
looking at
balloons.
was.
Yeah, right. Like, yeah. No, but so once I had already been writing about ghosts and the paranormal. I started my website ghostvillage.com back in 1999, and I still hadn't seen a ghost. So it was 2003, and I was in Paris, France, and I was in the catacombs, and I was doing a story on the haunts of the catacombs of Paris, and I'm down below the city, and I'm in this long corridor completely lined with human bones, and I saw this man that looked like a solid shadow figure step from the right side of the tunnel to the left and go back again, and I just sort of froze. And at that point, I had interviewed hundreds of people about their ghost experiences, and I always took the position that, like, well, I believe that you believe. I don't think you're lying to me. I can sort of tell the conviction. But at that moment I was like, oh my, this is what they're talking about. Like, I didn't ask for this. I wasn't expecting it. It's like a lightning strike. It does happen. I would just happen to see this one, and I'll never forget it. I mean, it took days and weeks to sink in.
Did that UFO incident happen before or after you made up your mind to be a ghost hunter?
Oh, the UFO thing, I was 11. So I didn't make up my mind for anything. Like, I didn't, I thought I'd be a rock star. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I have no idea. I knew around right after graduating high school, I knew I wanted to write. I knew I was like collecting stories was important to me. It called to me. And then this subject just sort of naturally drew me in. And then once you get into ghosts, I found anyway, like once you start going down the rabbit hole, like don't go halfway.
Oh, you gotta be open and go all the way.
All the way. Just
Yeah.
keep going. And then I got into like, the stories of other stuff. And when I do my weekly podcast, New England Legends, we cover everything. We cover UFOs, we cover cryptids, we cover ghosts, and just odd history. It's because, I mean, in for a penny, in for a pound, right? Like you got to put it all on the table at some point.
I am totally agreement in that, because if you if you disregard other things, then you're kind of becoming oblivious to what answers you might be staring in front of you that could explain or help understand the subject that you are paying attention to. So you kind of got to. And I'm really glad that you are a writer, because that sadly is a dying form which needs to be preserved. We do need more writers. I'm a huge advocate of reading, and I don't like reading ebooks. I like to hold my book physically. I'm old-fashioned. I'm Gen X.
Sure.
I'm in my 40s, so could be that. I guess versus other people. Personally, I think it's a combination of having to want to hold it and just being sick and tired of screens in general all day long.
Yeah, well, your book's never gonna die from batteries, and you can be anywhere with it, and it's not gonna like glow and radiate your eyeballs. It's I get it. There is something really comforting about like a book. It's like a friend that you carry with you for sure.
Was there a book that you read about these topics when you were young that really inspired you, or when you decided to be a writer in high school? What drew you to ghosts? Because obviously curiosity is a big factor. I like mysteries, but personally, what brought me, and the reason why I'm not in a courtroom practicing law, even though I spent a ton of money and a lot more for going to law school and graduating and all that, is because of the passion in UFOs and ghosts and, like you said, cryptids and weird history and all of that. But that does go back to 84, 85 when I had my first sighting. And that did play a role, even though there were several different things throughout each, decade that I decided I was going to ultimately look where I ended up in my 40s.
Right. Yeah. No, so there's books I read as a kid. Sure. Brad Steiger's books, Hans Holzer's books. That's what was around back then. There weren't, a zillion paranormal authors, Ed and Lorraine Warren's books too. But, Stephen, if anyone who's an aspiring writer, you should read Stephen King's memoir on writing. It's a must for any writer. And even if you don't like his fiction, like it's just a great way to look at the job of writing. And so he said how every writer has like hundreds of books that inspire them. Like, oh, this is so good. I love this. But there's one book that's so bad that it pushes you into action, where you say like, wait a minute, I'm better than this piece of crap right now. Like we can all read the greats and go, oh, if I could only aspire to that. But there's this stuff, like someone published this steaming pile. And I remember getting that book. It was like, it was like 2003, and someone had sent me a book to review for Ghost Village. And I'm not going to say who, because I actually know the person, and I think he's a fine person, just a horrible writer. And I got the book, and I was like, this is terrible. And someone published this. And I'm like, that's it. I should have my own book deal. And I created a proposal, an idea. I submitted it to a publisher. I got my very first book deal. And I've kind of been off to the races ever since. But I will never, ever say the person's name. Doesn't matter. Again, a fine human being. But the book was so bad. Thank you for getting my writing career started.
Now, I was going to save this, obviously, for you to plug in. But considering there was a question, I think this is a perfect timing. Sasquatch Agency, I'm just going to summarize the question, wanted to ask if you wrote a book on your climb to Mount Kilimanjaro and where to find it. And the obvious answer is yes, because I'm holding the book. So go ahead and tell people the title again and where they can find it.
So yeah, the book is called The Call of Kilimanjaro, Finding Hope Above the Clouds. It's available wherever books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore, wherever. But also, if I could do one shameless plug, if you're interested in the book, you can email me, Kili, Kili, at jeffbelanger.com. It's JEFFBELANGER.com. And I'll automatically send you the first chapter as a PDF. You can check it out. Kick the tires before you buy it. And If you want to, there'll be a link in there. You can buy it directly from the publisher that's autographed, because these days of COVID, we can't do book signings, Dr. J.
I know. It's
Uh,
such a burn.
it's a horrible time to have a new book come out. So, because I miss that. I'm doing tons and tons of library programs and stuff, but they're all on Zoom,
But
which
yeah,
is
but still, it's not the same. You're
it's
not,
not the same.
we don't have that physical interaction. It really, a year into it, really starts. You could see the effects that it's having on society, and even personally, what I've noticed, anxiety, for instance, when you go into a store because you're not used to seeing or being in front of people as you normally would be a year and a half ago.
Yeah, no, it's a new world, but you know what? We're getting through it. I really feel like the light's at the end of the tunnel, and people are getting vaccinated now, and I feel like we're getting there. I think we're getting closer and getting back to some new sense of normal, and what a story to tell one day. I mean, I spend so much time in the newspaper archives for my research on ghost adventures and my own work, and there's so many great articles from like 1918 where like they could have been written in 2020, like just people wearing masks and some people being mad about it and some people thinking we shouldn't have to. Like it's all we've all been here. We just weren't alive, for it. History does repeat. And that's, I think, another important reason why we tell these stories and we collect them, because we know there will be more unsolved murders and we know there'll be more mountains to climb.
That's right.
So yeah. And that's the thing, right? Like, so what I love as a writer is that the mountain is the ultimate metaphor. Anything can be a mountain, getting over a breakup, trying to get a new job, moving. So many things can be a metaphorical mountain. But those are mountains that just sort of end up in our path through no fault of our own. But the mountains that we choose to put in front of us and test ourselves, that's important, especially as you get older and maybe you get a little too comfortable. You have the life that's the job that pays your bills and lets you put pizza on the table and beer in the fridge, and you've got the friends that you like and they don't annoy you, and the job that you're good at. And sometimes we need to shake things up, and so putting a literal mountain in front of you is a pretty good way to do it.
I agree, because if you only had just a flat terrain straight ahead of you, and we wouldn't be facing any challenges, and it requires us to not only face challenges but to fail here and there in order to learn.
Oh God, failing is amazing. I excel at it. Like I think about how many things I've written that have never been published, or how many ideas I've had that have never left the drawing board, and that's the craft of the creative person, right? You fail over and over and over, and once in a while you don't. That's the surprise, right? When you're like, whoa, look at that, this one worked, and you live for that stuff. But yeah, and don't be afraid to fail. Like you learn more from failure than you ever would from like some 4-year degree or an advanced degree or otherwise. Get out there and fail, everybody.
That's
over
true.
And over. Fail and fail until you stop.
That's some of the best advice that anyone's ever said, and I really hope everyone else does pay attention to that, because it's one thing to say it yourself, but it's another thing when you hear it from somebody else, because to me it's more impactful. What advice would you give to those who may have caught on late about if they want to make that climb that you did?
So I don't care what your Kilimanjaro is, right? It doesn't have to be a literal mountain, but take care of your body, take care of your mind. And one last lesson that I will leave you with is that, and I didn't realize it till I got to the very top of Kilimanjaro. I'd heard other people say it, but it just doesn't hit the same until you're actually there. When I reached the summit sign, 19,341 feet, air so thin you can't even talk because you're just fighting for every breath. And it had been 6 days to get to the top of that, and years of dreaming about it. And you get to the summit sign and you realize, oh my, this is only the halfway point.
You got a lot more to go.
You got to get back down.
That too, yeah.
That's the thing, right? And so you've got to come down. Getting there, who cares? It doesn't mean anything if you don't get down. But not only that, not only do you have to come down, you have to get home. And that's what sort of hit me, is just like every adventure now starts, but also ends at home. And home is like that magical place, right? It's I feel like we've killed the word love. I love chicken wings. I love watching football. I love beer. I love my daughter. I love my wife. I love my parents, my family. But how can I put my family and my daughter and my wife in the same level as chicken
Or
wings
beer. I
or
totally
beer?
agree with you. We
Right?
have killed that word.
We've killed it. But the word home is unique. It represents a place. It doesn't matter if you own, rent, apartment, house, mansion, shack, tent, whatever. Home is like where your people are, where you are most yourself, most relaxed, and those things you care about the most all reside. And that is a word that's much bigger than love. Much, much bigger than love. Love can't hold a candle to home. And so that's what was a wonderful realization for me. It's just that like my adventures now all begin and end home, right? That summit was just halfway to this thing that I had dreamed about, and I didn't even realize it till I got there.
That's very, very well said. I'm going to actually quote you down the line, if you
Sure.
don't mind. A couple more things. And by the way, please hang by for a quick moment afterwards so I can thank you and say a couple
Sure.
things. Any advice for any aspiring paranormal hunters? What would you say to them?
Whatever things inspire you to want to look into the paranormal, whether it's a TV show, a book, a radio show, a podcast, whatever, that's great. By all means, be inspired, but be yourself, right? Bring what you do to the table to this subject, to the, to your own research, right? Don't try to emulate and be someone else. Be yourself. Someone once told me, and they were trying to be flattering, and it was flattering. They said, "I'm going to be the next Jeff Belanger," and I was like, "Why? We already have one. Why don't you be the next?
Be
you?
yourself.
Yeah, be yourself. I'm already here. Like you do you, and that's what we need is individuality. Because I see so many people that are they're trying to get like matching T-shirts and look like the TV shows and go in night vision cameras and hunt and scream at ghosts in the dark, and I'm like, that's been done. We can watch that on TV anytime. Like what can you do that's different? How can you change the game and do things your way? And that's what I would advise is just someone find their own voice, right?
There's a couple of people that I'm going to play this for literally because they need to hear that, and I think that's great. Let me throw a couple formalities out of the way. I want to thank, of course, a couple super chatters. I've had a thank you, Rockstar. You rock. I appreciate the comment. And, of course, earlier, Nico Pluto. Thank you for saying long live Dr. J. I want to say long live all of you in the chat. Thankfully, there's been a lot of great comments that I've seen. And yes, I do pay attention to all of it. That the reason why I ask for questions in caps is so I know that is a question. Also, I do have a new site with a new webmaster. I'd like to get your opinion. Do you like the old site or the new site? I have to create a backup plan in case I get deplatformed again. You guys probably already know that I've been kicked off Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I have to fear that others will follow. So that is going to be the home base, and of course, it's just drjradiolive.com. When I put the old website, I'll put it on probably a backup domain. I will let you all know. Please do like, subscribe, and share. And with that being said, folks, this is Dr. J, host of Dr. J Radio Live with the one and only Jeff Belanger. And Jeff, if you have a final statement for everybody, what would you say?
Dream big, everybody. Dream big and chase it.
Well said. Now we are going